The ballroom fell silent as the champagne glass slipped from my trembling fingers. "You're adopted," my sister had whispered, her lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. In that moment, on what should have been the happiest day of my life, my entire identity shattered on the marble floor alongside that crystal flute. But what she didn't know was that our grandfather had left me something more valuable than any inheritance: the truth, preserved in his own voice. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Daniel Mitchell. I'm 32 years old, and a cultural anthropologist specializing in family histories and genealogy. Ironic, I know. This is the story of how I reclaimed my place in a family that tried to erase me with a single sentence. The wedding had been planned for 2 years, a grand affair at the Rosemont Estate, a historic venue overlooking the Pacific that cost more than my annual salary. I'd spent months agonizing over every detail, from the hand-calligraphed place cards to the locally sourced menu. Everything was perfect, until it wasn't. The first sign should have been my sister Vanessa's smile when she arrived 3 days before the ceremony. Too wide, too practiced. We'd never been close, but the 5-year gap between us had widened into an ocean after our grandfather died. He'd been my champion, my confidant, the only one who seemed to understand my fascination with stories and histories, while the rest of the family pushed me toward business and law. "Danny," she'd said, air-kissing both my cheeks in the hotel lobby, "I almost didn't recognize you without your nose in some dusty old book." Her laugh tinkled like ice in a glass. My fiancée Eliza had squeezed my hand under the table, a silent reassurance. The second sign came during the rehearsal dinner. My father, Richard Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Financial Group, had barely acknowledged my entrance. My mother, Carolyn's smile never reached her eyes as she introduced me to her friends. "This is Daniel, our historian." The pause was small but cutting. Not our son. Our historian. As if my profession defined my place in the family hierarchy. "You should hear some of the fascinating research Daniel's done on the Mitchell family line," Eliza had interjected, her chin raised slightly in defiance. "He's traced it back to the Revolutionary War." My father had cleared his throat. "Well, blood isn't everything, is it?" The comment had seemed odd at the time, but I'd brushed it off as another jab at my career choice. If only I'd recognized the warning for what it was. The day of the wedding dawned clear and perfect. Golden California sunshine streamed through the windows of the estate's preparation rooms. Eliza looked radiant in her dress, her dark hair swept into an elegant updo adorned with tiny white flowers. "Ready to become a Mitchell, officially?" I joked, adjusting my bow tie. "I'm ready to be your wife," she'd replied, kissing me softly. "The rest is just paperwork." The ceremony went flawlessly. We exchanged vows beneath an arch of roses and ivy, the ocean a shimmering backdrop behind us. Eliza's voice had been steady, confident. Mine had cracked with emotion. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the applause seemed genuine, even from my family's side of the aisle. It was during the reception that everything fell apart. The golden hour had bathed the ballroom in warm light, the string quartet played softly, and the first round of champagne had loosened tongues and lightened moods. I'd been making my way to the head table when Vanessa intercepted me, 2 glasses in her hands. "A toast to my little brother," she'd said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, but quiet enough that her next words were for me alone. She leaned in, her pearl earrings catching the light. "Or should I say, the family charity case? You know you're adopted, right? Dad only kept you because Grandpa threatened to change the will." The champagne glass had slipped from my fingers then, shattering on the marble floor. The music faltered. Heads turned, and in that moment of silence, I saw the truth in her eyes. She'd been waiting years to deliver that blow. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Vanessa's smile widened. "Oh, Danny, did you really think you were one of us? The black sheep historian in a family of financial geniuses? Haven't you ever looked at our family photos and noticed you don't quite fit?" The room seemed to tilt. Memories flashed through my mind. Comments about my darker eyes when everyone else had blue. Jokes about where my curly hair came from when my parents both had straight. The strange distance my father always kept. The pieces were falling into place, revealing a picture I'd never wanted to see. "You're lying," I managed, though uncertainty had already taken root. "Ask Mom," she shrugged, sipping her champagne. "Though she'll probably try to spare your feelings. That's why they never told you. Didn't want to damage your fragile little ego." I felt a hand on my arm. Eliza, her eyes wide with concern. "Daniel? What's wrong?" Before I could answer, Vanessa spoke again, louder this time. "Just telling Danny here what a shame it is Grandpa isn't around to see this. He always did have a soft spot for the stray he brought into the family." My father appeared then, his face tight with anger. "Vanessa, that's enough." "What?" "It's his wedding day. Shouldn't he finally know the truth about who he is?" She turned to the curious onlookers. "Or rather, who he isn't." The whispers started immediately, rippling through the reception like wind through tall grass. I stood frozen, the pieces of the shattered champagne glass glittering around my feet like the fragments of my identity. My mother approached, her face pale. "Daniel, please, let's discuss this privately." "Is it true?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Am I adopted?" The hesitation before she answered told me everything. "We were going to tell you when you were older, but then it never seemed like the right time, and 32 years, I said flatly. 32 years wasn't enough time to find the right moment? "Your grandfather insisted we take you in," my father interjected, as if that explained everything. His old colleague's daughter had died, and there was no one else. He threatened to cut us out if we didn't. Each word hit like a physical blow. Not just adopted. Unwanted. A burden. An obligation. A business transaction. Eliza's grip on my arm tightened. "How dare you?" she hissed at my family. "How dare you do this today of all days?" "I always thought it was strange," Vanessa continued, seemingly enjoying the spectacle she'd created. "How Grandpa left you his study, his books, his recordings. Blood calls to blood, I suppose, except in your case. Recordings." The word cut through the haze of shock and betrayal. Grandpa's recordings. The hundreds of cassette tapes and mini-discs he'd made throughout his life, documenting family stories, business dealings, personal thoughts. The collection I'd inherited and had been slowly digitizing over the past year. Something clicked in my mind. A memory of my grandfather's voice, crackly through the old recording equipment, talking about a promise, about protection, about truth. I'd set that particular tape aside, meaning to return to it, but the wedding preparations had taken over. "Excuse me," I said, my voice suddenly clear and cold. "I need to make a call." I walked out of the ballroom, aware of the eyes following me, of Eliza hurrying behind, of the murmurs growing louder. In the quiet of the estate's library, I pulled out my phone and called Marco, my research assistant. "I need you to find a recording," I said the moment he answered. "In Grandpa Mitchell's collection, labeled July 1992, personal notes." "Your wedding is today," Marco replied, confused. "Shouldn't you be?" "Please, Marco." "It's important. I need you to find it and play it back to me." Now, while we waited for Marco to locate the tape, I explained the situation to Eliza in short, clipped sentences. Her face cycled through shock, anger, and then fierce determination. "It doesn't change anything," she said firmly. "Not about us. Not about who you are. But it changes everything about who I thought I was," I replied. My phone buzzed. Marco had found the recording and was sending an audio file. With shaking hands, I pressed play, and my grandfather's voice filled the room, strong despite the tape's age. July 16, 1992. Personal notes regarding Daniel James Mitchell, age 4 months. There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. "Today I made a decision that may divide this family. Caroline and Richard agreed to adopt Daniel, the son of James Lewis's daughter. But their motivations trouble me. Richard sees only the business advantage of maintaining ties to the Lewis fortune, not the child who needs a home." I felt the blood drain from my face. Eliza's hand found mine, squeezing tightly. I've made it clear that Daniel will be treated as a true Mitchell, with all the rights and privileges thereof. I've amended my will accordingly. Should they fail in this, should they treat him as anything less than blood, there will be consequences. And I've prepared for that possibility with this recording and others, to be given to Daniel when he's old enough to understand, or should the truth be revealed to him in a way I wouldn't approve of. There was another pause, and when my grandfather spoke again, his voice was gentler. Daniel, if you're hearing this, something has gone wrong. Know that you were wanted. By me, absolutely, and without reservation. Your biological mother was Claire Lewis, daughter of my dear friend James. She was brilliant, kind, and would have loved you fiercely had she lived. Your biological father is unknown, though Claire spoke of him with affection. You came to us after Claire died in childbirth, with no family left to claim you. Tears blurred my vision. Eliza's arm wrapped around my shoulders. Blood isn't what makes a family, Daniel. Love is. Loyalty is. The Mitchell name is yours by right of the love I bear you, not by accident of birth. Remember that, no matter what others may say. The recording continued, but I'd heard enough. A strange calm settled over me. I wasn't unwanted. I wasn't a burden. I was loved, truly, deeply loved, by the one person in the family whose opinion had always mattered most to me. There's more. Marco's voice came through the phone. Several recordings addressed specifically to you in case of something like this. And documents, too. Legal papers, letters from your biological mother. Send them, I said. Send everything. When we returned to the reception, the atmosphere was tense. Guests clustered in whispered conversations that halted abruptly as we entered. My parents and Vanessa stood near the head table, their faces a mixture of anger and defensive righteousness. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I approached them slowly, Eliza by my side, my phone in my hand. The string quartet had stopped playing. The photographer hovered uncertainly nearby. Daniel, my father began, his CEO voice in full effect. This is hardly the time or place for a family discussion. Let's all calm down and… I just spoke with Grandpa, I interrupted, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. My mother's face paled. What are you talking about? Your grandfather has been dead for 2 years. I held up my phone. He left me messages. Recordings. He knew this day might come. Vanessa laughed, though it sounded forced. Of course he left you his little tapes. You were his pet project. No, I said calmly. I was his grandson, the one he chose, not the ones he was given by chance. I pressed play, and my grandfather's voice rang out clear and authoritative. Should they treat him as anything less than blood, there will be consequences. My father's face hardened. Turn that off immediately. This is inappropriate and… Inappropriate? I repeated, stopping the recording. Like telling a child he's not wanted except as a business transaction? Like hiding his identity for 32 years? Like announcing he's adopted at his wedding reception to humiliate him? My mother stepped forward, reaching for my arm. I moved back, just out of reach. We did what we thought was best, she said, her voice pleading. Your grandfather didn't give us a choice. There's always a choice, I replied, and you made yours. Now I'm making mine. I turned to address the room at large, these people who had gathered to celebrate a union and were now witnesses to a fracture. Thank you all for coming today. I apologize for the drama, which was not part of the planned entertainment. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. My wife and I appreciate your presence and your gifts, but we'll be leaving now. Please, enjoy the rest of the evening on the Mitchell family's dime. I turned back to my parents and sister. I've spent my life studying family histories, documenting the threads that connect generations. I've interviewed hundreds of people about what makes a family. Not once did anyone mention blood. They talked about love, support, acceptance, honesty, things I never fully received from you. My father's jaw tightened. You've had every advantage. Accept the truth. I cut him off. Accept acceptance for who I am, not who you wanted me to be. I held up my phone again. Grandpa left me more than his study and his books. He left me the truth, carefully preserved for when I would need it most. And he left me something else too, his controlling interest in Mitchell Financial Group, to be revealed upon my marriage, or upon, and I quote, any attempt to diminish Daniel's rightful place in the family. The shock on their faces would have been satisfying if I hadn't been so tired, so emotionally drained. Vanessa recovered first, her voice sharp with disbelief. That's impossible. The company shares were divided between Dad and… Check with the family lawyer, I suggested. Grandpa was very thorough, very strategic. My father's face had gone from red to white. This is absurd. You can't possibly expect to run a financial empire. You're a historian, for God's sake. You're right, I agreed. I am a historian, which means I understand the importance of legacy, of integrity, of truth. I don't want to run your company, but I will ensure it's run ethically, with respect for the principles Grandpa valued. I took Eliza's hand, ready to leave, but turned back one last time. By the way, I've known I was adopted for about a year now. Their stunned expressions almost made me smile. I found my adoption papers while digitizing Grandpa's files. I was waiting for you to tell me yourselves, giving you the chance to be honest. I guess today I got my answer about whether that would ever happen. With that, we walked out of the ballroom, past the whispers and stares, through the grand entrance hall of the estate, and into the warm evening air. Our wedding coordinator hurried after us, frantically asking about the cake cutting, the first dance, the bouquet toss. Send the cake to the children's hospital down the road, Eliza told her. Donate the flowers to the retirement home. Tell the band they're still getting paid in full. In the parking lot, still in our wedding finery, we stood for a moment, uncertain. What now? Eliza asked softly. I looked at her. My wife, my partner, the person who had stood by me through this revelation without a moment's hesitation, and felt a surge of gratitude so powerful it momentarily eclipsed the pain. Now we go make our own family, I said. One built on truth from the very beginning. As we drove away from the Rosemont Estate, my phone buzzed with messages and calls from guests, from family members, from friends confused about the abrupt end to the celebration. I silenced it and tossed it onto the back seat. There would be time later for explanations, for legal discussions, for decisions about the future of Mitchell Financial Group and my role in it. There would be time to listen to all of Grandpa's recordings, to learn about my biological mother, to piece together the full story of how I came to be a Mitchell in name, if not in blood. But for now, there was just this moment. Driving along the coast with the woman I loved, leaving behind the weight of secrets and stepping into a future we would build together, brick by honest brick. 3 months after what the Mitchell family now referred to as the incident, I sat across from my father in his downtown office. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the San Francisco skyline, fog rolling in over the bay like a soft blanket. The Mitchell Financial Group headquarters had always intimidated me as a child, all steel and glass and hushed voices. Now I saw it for what it was, a temple built to worship wealth, not family. The board meeting is in 30 minutes, my father said, not looking up from the papers on his mahogany desk. Have you reviewed the documents I sent over? I have, I replied, setting my leather portfolio on the table between us. It contained copies of every recording my grandfather had left for me, all digitized, time-stamped, and legally verified. And I've prepared a statement of my own. This got his attention. Richard Mitchell finally looked at me directly, his blue eyes, so unlike my brown ones, narrowing slightly. Daniel, I thought we had an understanding. You maintain your shares, we maintain our positions, and the company continues as it always has. That was before I found the other recordings, I said quietly. His hands stilled over the papers. What other recordings? Grandpa was more thorough than even I realized. He didn't just document my adoption. He documented everything. Board meetings where ethical corners were cut, private conversations about client manipulation, discussions about regulatory evasion. 27 years of evidence, meticulously cataloged. The color drained from my father's face. Those recordings would be inadmissible in any court. They were made without consent. Perhaps, I agreed. But the court of public opinion doesn't care about admissibility. Neither do regulatory agencies when they're tipped off about where to look. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in Richard Mitchell's eyes. Not concern, not annoyance, not disappointment, but genuine fear. It should have been satisfying. Instead, it felt hollow. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I leaned forward. "I want what Grandpa wanted, for Mitchell Financial Group to be an ethical institution. One that helps people build secure futures instead of exploiting them for profit. This is business, not charity," he snapped, some of his usual fire returning. "It can be both," I countered, "and it will be, starting today." I stood, straightening my tie, one of the few I owned, purchased specifically for this meeting. "The board is expecting a routine succession announcement. They'll get one, but not the one you prepared." As I turned to leave, he called after me. "He wasn't your real grandfather, you know, not by blood." I paused at the door. He was the only real thing in this family. The boardroom fell silent as I entered. 12 men and women in expensive suits, my father's carefully chosen allies, watched me with curious eyes. My sister Vanessa sat near the head of the table, her face a mask of polite interest that didn't quite hide her contempt. This wasn't her domain. She ran the Mitchell Foundation, the family's philanthropic arm, more concerned with social appearances than financial dealings. But she attended board meetings as a major shareholder. My father took his seat at the head of the table, gesturing for me to sit in the empty chair to his right, my grandfather's old seat. Instead, I remained standing. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "Thank you for accommodating this special meeting. As you know, recent revelations about my adoption have raised questions about succession and control of Mitchell Financial Group." Murmurs rippled around the table. My father's jaw tightened. To clarify any confusion, I continued. "I'd like to play a recording from Jefferson Mitchell, my grandfather, made specifically for this occasion." I placed my phone on the table and pressed play. The room filled with my grandfather's voice, stronger than the last time I'd heard it in person, as if he'd summoned extra vitality for this final performance. "To the board of directors of Mitchell Financial Group, if this recording is being played, then my grandson Daniel has claimed his rightful place among you. Some may question his legitimacy based on blood. To them, I say this: legacy is not about DNA. It's about values, integrity, and vision." I watched the board members' faces as my grandfather's voice continued, laying out his expectations for the company's future, for ethical reform, for a return to the principles upon which he'd founded the firm. Some looked uncomfortable, others intrigued. Vanessa studied her manicure, attempting indifference, but her tense shoulders betrayed her. Finally, the recording concluded. "I leave you with this thought. The measure of our success is not in our profit margins, but in the lives we improve. Daniel understands this in ways my son never did. Listen to him. Or don't, but know that I have provided him with everything he needs to enforce these changes, with or without your cooperation." Silence hung in the air after the recording ended. I let it stretch, remembering what my grandfather had taught me about the power of silence in negotiations. "What exactly are you proposing?" asked Eleanor Grayson, the longest-serving board member, and my grandfather's former friend. I handed out folders containing my proposal, a restructuring of the firm's priorities, an ethics committee with actual authority, transparency measures, and a significant increase in the firm's community investment programs. "This isn't just idealism," I said as they flipped through the pages. "It's good business. The market is changing. Investors, especially younger ones, care about where their money goes and what it does. We have an opportunity to lead that change rather than resist it." My father cleared his throat. "While Daniel's enthusiasm is admirable, these proposals would significantly impact our bottom line. As CEO, I cannot recommend." "Actually," I interrupted, "as of this morning you are no longer CEO." The room erupted in confusion. My father's face flushed dark red. "That's absurd. You can't—" I'm not, I said calmly. The ethics committee is. The one Grandpa established in his final amendment to the company charter. The amendment you chose not to disclose to the board. I nodded to Eleanor, who reached into her briefcase and withdrew a document. I received this directly from Jefferson's attorney last week, she explained to the stunned board members. It establishes an independent ethics oversight committee with the power to remove officers found in violation of the firm's ethical guidelines. And what violation am I supposedly guilty of? My father demanded. I met his gaze steadily. The committee has evidence of multiple violations, including manipulating client portfolios to benefit family investments, concealing losses, and misrepresenting risk assessments. The details are all in Section 3 of your folders. The board members hurriedly flipped to the indicated section, their expressions growing more concerned with each page. My father seemed to physically shrink in his chair as he realized the extent of what had been uncovered. This is a coup, he said finally, his voice hollow. No, I corrected. It's a correction, one that's long overdue. Eleanor spoke up again. The committee has appointed an interim CEO while we conduct a proper search. Daniel has declined the position, feeling his expertise lies elsewhere. This caught my father by surprise. His head snapped up, confusion evident in his eyes. You're not taking over? I'm an anthropologist and historian, I reminded him. My job is to preserve the past and understand human systems, not to run a financial empire. I'll remain on the board and chair the new community investment division, but the company needs a CEO with proper financial experience. Then what was the point of all this? Vanessa asked, speaking for the first time. If not to take control? I looked at my sister. Technically not my sister by blood, though we'd been raised as siblings. In her eyes, I saw not just anger, but genuine bewilderment. The concept of pursuing justice without seeking power was foreign to her. The point was to make things right, I said simply. To honor the legacy Grandpa entrusted to me. Not the Mitchell name or the Mitchell money, but the Mitchell values, the real ones, not the ones that have been distorted over time. The remainder of the meeting passed in a blur of technical discussions, legal clarifications, and next steps. By the end, my father had been officially removed as CEO, an interim leadership team established, and my proposals adopted in principle pending further review. As the board members filed out, many nodded respectfully in my direction. A few even stopped to shake my hand. Vanessa lingered, waiting until we were alone before approaching me. You've destroyed everything our parents built, she said, but the usual venom was missing from her voice. No, I replied. I've saved what our grandfather built from what our parents nearly destroyed. She studied me for a moment, head tilted slightly. You knew, didn't you? Before the wedding, you already knew you were adopted. Yes. Then why did you react that way when I told you? Why the whole dramatic scene? I gathered my papers slowly, considering my answer. I wasn't reacting to the news of my adoption. I was reacting to the realization that my sister, the person I'd grown up with, shared a home with for 18 years, hated me enough to try to ruin the happiest day of my life. Something flickered across her face. Regret, perhaps, or simple recognition of the truth. She opened her mouth as if to say more, then closed it, turned on her heel, and left. I remained in the boardroom, alone with the ghost of my grandfather. I could almost see him sitting at the head of the table, glasses perched on his nose, that half smile he wore when he was proud but trying not to show it too obviously. I did it, Grandpa, I whispered to the empty room. I made it right. The drive home took me through the city and over the Golden Gate Bridge, the late afternoon sun turning the water beneath to molten gold. Eliza was waiting on the porch of our small Sausalito home, a cup of tea in her hands, her face anxious. How did it go? She asked as I climbed the steps. I sat beside her on the porch swing, loosening my tie. About as well as a corporate coup can go, I suppose. And your father? Shocked, angry, confused about why I didn't take his job. I smiled faintly. I don't think power for its own sake makes sense to him as a motivation. It's the only one he really understands. Eliza took my hand, her fingers warm from the teacup. And how are you feeling? I considered the question seriously. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind. Listening to all of Grandpa's recordings, meeting with lawyers, preparing the case against my father, all while processing the truth about my origins and what it meant for my identity. Tired, I admitted. Relieved, a little sad. I squeezed her hand, but mostly free. Like I've been carrying this weight I didn't even know was there, and now it's gone. She rested her head on my shoulder, and we sat in comfortable silence, watching the fog roll in across the bay. After a while, she spoke again, her voice soft. "I have something to show you." She led me inside to our small home office, where a large cardboard box sat on the desk. This arrived today, from James Lewis's estate attorney. My heart skipped a beat. James Lewis, my biological grandfather, my grandfather's friend. How did they find us? Apparently, Jefferson Mitchell left instructions for certain materials to be delivered to you after the Mitchell Financial Group situation was resolved. The attorney has been keeping tabs on the company news. With trembling hands, I opened the box. Inside were photo albums, letters, journals. The life of Claire Lewis, my biological mother, preserved in paper and ink. A young woman with my eyes and curly hair smiled up from the top photograph, her arms around a young man whose face had been carefully cut out of the picture. "My father," I whispered, touching the empty space where his face should have been. "Keep looking," Eliza urged gently. Beneath the albums was a sealed envelope with my name written on it in unfamiliar handwriting. I opened it carefully, unfolding the single sheet of paper inside. "My dearest son," it began. "If you're reading this, then I am gone, and you have found your way back to your history. I write this not knowing if I will survive your birth, but feeling in my heart that I may not. The doctors have been clear about the risks, but bringing you into this world is a choice I make gladly and without regret." Tears blurred my vision. I blinked them away, determined to read every word, to hear my mother's voice for the first time. "Your father's name is Alexander Hayes. He is a good man who doesn't know about you, and by my choice never will. Our time together was brief but meaningful, and ended before I knew of your existence. He has his own path to follow, as you will have yours. Perhaps someday, if you wish to find him, this information will help you begin that journey." The letter continued, telling me about her life, her hopes for mine, her gratitude to Jefferson Mitchell for promising to watch over me. It ended simply, "Know that you were loved from your very first moment. That love doesn't end with my death. It lives in you, in the family who raises you, in the life you build. All my love, forever and always, your mother, Claire." I sat heavily in the desk chair, the letter trembling in my hands. Eliza knelt beside me, her arm around my shoulders, saying nothing, simply being present in my grief and discovery. "She knew she might die," I said finally. "She chose to have me anyway." "She loved you," Eliza said softly. "So much that she made sure you'd know it, even if she couldn't tell you herself." I carefully returned the letter to its envelope, then looked through the rest of the box's contents. Photos of Claire growing up, her school reports, newspaper clippings of her achievements, letters between her and my grandfather Jefferson, piecing together the life of the woman who had given me mine. In one album, I found a photo that made my breath catch, Claire and Jefferson, standing together on a fishing boat, both laughing at something off camera. They had the same crinkles around their eyes when they smiled, the same slight tilt of the head. For a moment I could almost believe they were actually related by blood. "Do you want to try to find him?" Eliza asked, pointing to the empty space in the photos where Alexander Hayes should have been. "Your biological father?" I considered the question, running my fingers over my mother's handwriting. "Not yet," I said finally. "Maybe someday. But right now, I think I need to get to know her first." That night, as we lay in bed, Eliza propped herself up on one elbow, her expression serious in the dim light. "I've been thinking," she said, "about family, about legacies." "Dangerous topics," I teased gently. She smiled, but her eyes remained solemn. "What your grandfather did for you, choosing you, protecting you, preparing for a future he wouldn't see. It's extraordinary." "It is," I agreed. I don't think I'll ever fully understand why he did it. I think I do, she said. He saw something in you worth preserving, worth fighting for. The same thing I see. She took a deep breath. I want us to consider adoption. The words hung between us in the darkness. We'd discussed children before, in the abstract way of a someday conversation. But this was different. This was real. Because of my story? I asked. Partly, she admitted. But also because there are children out there who need what Jefferson gave you. Someone who chooses them, who fights for them, who prepares a place for them in the world. I thought about my grandfather, about how he'd changed the course of my life with his choice to bring me into his family, about how he'd seen beyond blood to something more important. Yes, I said, the word feeling right as soon as it left my lips. Let's do it. The next morning I called the number Claire had included in her letter for Alexander Hayes. It was disconnected, as I'd expected after so many years. But it was a start. A thread to follow if I chose to. Instead, I turned my attention to another thread, the one that connected me to Jefferson Mitchell. I drove to the family mausoleum in the hills overlooking the city, a place I hadn't visited since his funeral 2 years earlier. The stone building stood against the sky, the Mitchell name carved above the entrance. Inside, the air was cool and still, marble plaques marking generations of Mitchells. I found my grandfather's in the newest section, his name and dates engraved in elegant script. I found her, I said to the silent stone. Claire. Thank you for keeping her for me until I was ready. I placed a small stone on top of the plaque, a tradition from my anthropological studies, a sign that someone had visited, had remembered. And thank you for keeping me. As I turned to leave, my phone rang. Vanessa's name flashing on the screen. I almost declined the call, then reconsidered and answered. Daniel, she said, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. I've been thinking about what you said, about why you reacted the way you did at the wedding. I waited, saying nothing. I didn't, she paused, started again. I didn't think about it that way, about what it meant to try to hurt you like that. Why did you? I asked, the question that had haunted me for months. What did I ever do to make you hate me so much? There was a long silence before she answered. You were chosen, she said finally, her voice small. Dad and Mom had me because that's what was expected. The Mitchell heir. But Grandpa chose you. He looked at you and saw something worth fighting for. He never looked at me that way. The simple truth of it left me speechless. All these years, I'd thought she resented me for not being a real Mitchell. But her resentment stemmed from something deeper, the fear that she wasn't chosen, wasn't truly wanted for herself. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she continued when I didn't respond. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did, and I'm sorry. Thank you for saying that, I said finally. It matters. Another silence stretched between us, less tense than before. I heard you're starting an adoption process, she said. Mom mentioned Eliza called her for some family medical history. We are, I confirmed, surprised that Eliza had reached out to my mother. It's early days yet. That's good. You'll be good parents. She cleared her throat. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Goodbye, Daniel. Vanessa, I said quickly, before she could hang up. Would you want to get coffee sometime? Just to talk? The pause that followed felt like it contained years of missed connections, of parallel lives that had never quite intersected properly. I'd like that, she said finally. As I walked back to my car, the sun broke through the fog, illuminating the city below. I thought about family, the ones we're born to, the ones who choose us, the ones we choose in return, about how the stories we tell about ourselves and each other shape who we become. I thought about the child Eliza and I might someday welcome, about the story I would tell them. Not a story of rejection and secret recordings, but a story of being chosen, again and again, by people who saw something worth preserving. My phone buzzed with a text from Eliza. Found an adoption agency with an information session next week. Ready to take the first step? I smiled and texted back a single word, ready. As I drove home, I realized that this wasn't an ending but a beginning. The recordings that had revealed my past were now helping me build my future, a future where truth was the foundation, not an afterthought. Where being chosen was a gift to be passed on, not a weapon to be wielded. And perhaps someday, I would make recordings of my own, not as insurance against betrayal, but as a legacy of love for the next generation, chosen or born, connected by blood or by something stronger. 2 years passed, like the turning of pages in a well-loved book. Eliza and I moved from our small Sausalito home to a craftsman-style house in Berkeley with a garden that bloomed year-round and a nursery painted in soft yellows and greens. The walls were lined with bookshelves, some filled with my anthropological research, others with children's books waiting for small hands to discover them. The adoption process had been longer and more complex than we'd anticipated. Background checks, home studies, interviews, mountains of paperwork that tested even my historian's patience for documentation. But throughout it all, we'd held on to the certainty that somewhere, our child was waiting for us, just as I had once waited for a family to claim me. It was a Tuesday morning in April when the call came. I was in my study, surrounded by Claire's journals. I'd been reading them chronologically, getting to know my birth mother through her own words, discovering the parts of myself that echoed her. Her love of stories, her fascination with connections between people, her quiet determination. "Daniel?" Eliza called from the doorway, her face flushed, phone clutched in her hand. That was Sandra from the agency. They have a baby. A little girl, 6 weeks old. The birth mother reviewed our profile, and she chose us. The world seemed to still for a moment, everything narrowing to Eliza's shining eyes, to the phone in her hand that had just delivered the news we'd been waiting for. "When?" I managed, my voice barely a whisper. "Friday," she said. "We can meet her on Friday." 3 days. After 2 years of waiting. Suddenly, we had only 3 days to prepare. We moved in a whirlwind of activity, finalizing the nursery, purchasing last-minute necessities, calling our support network with the news. My hands shook as I assembled the crib that had been waiting in boxes for months, as I folded tiny clothes and arranged stuffed animals. On Thursday night, the eve of meeting our daughter, Eliza found me in the nursery, sitting in the rocking chair, holding a small, recordable storybook, one that would capture my voice reading the story for when I couldn't be there in person. "Second thoughts?" she asked softly, leaning against the doorframe. I shook my head. "No, just overwhelmed. In 24 hours, we'll be parents. Everything will change." She crossed the room and perched on the arm of the chair, her hand finding mine. "Scared?" "Terrified," I admitted. "What if I don't know how to be a good father? What if I make the same mistakes my parents did?" "The fact that you're asking those questions is already proof you won't," she said. "Your parents never questioned whether they were doing right by you. They never doubted their approach." I thought about that, about Richard and Caroline Mitchell's certainty, their unshakable belief that their way was the only way, about how that certainty had blinded them to the damage they were causing. "Besides," Eliza continued, "you have examples of what not to do, but you also have examples of what to do right. Your grandfather chose love over blood. Claire chose your life over her own. Those are powerful legacies to draw from." I nodded slowly, running my fingers over the book's cover. "I've been thinking about names," I said. "What if we call her Clara? After my birth mother?" Eliza's eyes softened. "Clara Jefferson Mitchell. It has a beautiful ring to it. You wouldn't mind using my family names?" "They're good names with good stories behind them," she said simply. "Stories our daughter should know." The next morning, we drove to the agency in Oakland, the car seat installed in the back, a diaper bag packed with more supplies than we would likely need for a brief meeting. The social worker, Sandra, met us in the lobby, her smile warm and reassuring. "The birth mother has already said her goodbyes," she explained as she led us to a small, comfortable room. "She left a letter for the baby to read someday, and one for you as well." She was very clear about her decision, and very certain about choosing your family. My heart ached for this unknown woman who, like Claire, was making the painful choice to give her child a different life than the one she could provide. "Does she know about my background?" I asked. That I was adopted? Sandra nodded. That was one of the reasons she selected your profile. She said she wanted someone who would understand what her daughter might feel someday, who could guide her through those questions of identity. We stopped outside a door decorated with colorful butterflies. Sandra's hand rested on the knob. Ready to meet your daughter? Eliza's hand found mine, squeezing tightly. We nodded in unison. The room was bright and cheerful, painted in soft pastels. In the center, a social worker sat in a rocking chair, holding a small bundle wrapped in a pink blanket. She looked up as we entered, her face breaking into a smile. Here she is, she said softly, standing. 6 pounds, 4 ounces of pure perfection. She transferred the bundle to Eliza's waiting arms with practiced ease. I moved closer, my breath catching as I saw our daughter's face for the first time. Tiny features, skin the color of warm honey, a dusting of dark hair. Her eyes were closed, long lashes resting against her cheeks. "Hello, Clara," Eliza whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We've been waiting for you." As if responding to her name, the baby's eyes fluttered open, dark, solemn eyes that seemed to look right through me. I reached out with one trembling finger, and her tiny hand closed around it with surprising strength. In that moment, I understood what my grandfather had felt all those years ago, that instantaneous connection, that recognition of something precious that transcended blood and DNA. I understood why he had fought so hard to protect me, why he had prepared so thoroughly for a future he wouldn't see. "I've got you," I promised her silently. "And I always will." The first weeks passed in a blur of midnight feedings, diaper changes, and moments of pure wonder. Clara was a quiet baby, watchful and serious, only crying when she needed something specific. Eliza joked that she had inherited my researcher's temperament, observing the world carefully before engaging with it. When Clara was 6 weeks old, the same age she had been when she came to us, I set up the video camera in the nursery. Eliza raised an eyebrow as she finished the nighttime feeding. "Making memories?" she asked. "Making recordings?" I corrected gently. "Like Grandpa did for me. Things I want her to know in case." I trailed off, unable to complete the thought. Eliza nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. She kissed Clara's forehead, then mine, and left us alone together. I settled into the rocking chair, Clara cradled against my chest and pressed record. "Hello, Clara," I began softly. "It's June 15th, 2023, and you're 12 weeks old today. You're wearing the yellow pajamas with ducks that Aunt Vanessa sent, and you've just had your evening bottle. Your mom says you're growing too fast." I think she's right. I paused, gathering my thoughts. I wanted to start recording these messages for you, so that no matter what happens, you'll always know your story. The real one, not a version edited by time or convenience. You came to us through adoption, chosen twice. First by your birth mother, who made the incredibly brave decision to place you with a family who could give you what she couldn't at this point in her life. And then by your mom and me, who had been waiting for you before we even knew you existed. Clara's eyes began to drift closed, her small body relaxing into sleep. I continued, my voice barely above a whisper. "Someday, you might have questions about belonging, about identity, about what makes a family. I know those questions intimately. When I was your age, I was also adopted, though I didn't learn that truth until much later. My hope is that by always being honest with you, by celebrating your story rather than hiding it, those questions won't carry the same pain for you that they did for me." I told her about Jefferson, about Claire, about the recordings that had preserved my history until I was ready to hear it. I told her about Alexander Hayes, the biological father I still hadn't tried to find, though I kept his name and what little information Claire had provided safely stored for the future. I told her about the Mitchell family, the complicated legacy she had inherited not through blood but through choice. "The most important thing I want you to know," I concluded as her breathing deepened into sleep, "is that family isn't defined by DNA. It's defined by love, by choice, by showing up for each other day after day. You are a Mitchell and a Hayes, and whatever your birth parents' names may be, you contain multitudes. And you are, above all, deeply loved. I ended the recording and sat there in the dark nursery for a long time, listening to Clara's soft breathing, marveling at how completely this tiny person had rewritten the narrative of my life. The next morning brought an unexpected email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read simply, "Alexander Hayes, response to your inquiry." My heart raced as I opened it. 6 months earlier, I'd finally gathered the courage to try to find my biological father, working with a private investigator who specialized in adoption reunions. After following several false leads, the trail had gone cold, and I'd begun to accept that Alexander Hayes might remain a mystery, a blank space in my family tree. Dr. Mitchell, the email began formally. My name is Thomas Hayes. My father, Alexander Hayes, received your letter last month. He asked me to respond on his behalf. I read the rest of the email with growing disbelief. Alexander Hayes was alive, living in Portland. He had married shortly after his brief relationship with Claire and had 3 children, my half-siblings. He had never known about Claire's pregnancy, had never known about me. My father was quite shocked to learn of your existence, Thomas wrote. He has spoken often of Claire Lewis over the years. They met during a summer research program at Berkeley in 1991. Her death affected him deeply, though they had already parted ways by then. He would like to meet you, if you are amenable. However, he is in the early stages of Parkinson's disease and does not travel easily. If you could come to Portland, our family would welcome you. I sat staring at the screen long after I'd finished reading, emotions washing over me in waves. The father I'd never known wanted to meet me. I had half-siblings. A whole branch of my family tree suddenly filled in with names and lives that connected to mine. Eliza found me still at the computer, Clara napping against my chest in her carrier. "What is it?" she asked. Concern etched on her face. Wordlessly, I turned the screen toward her. She read quickly, her eyes widening. "Will you go?" she asked when she'd finished. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to rush to Portland tomorrow. Another part is terrified." I looked down at Clara's sleeping face. What would I even say to him? "Hello, I'm the son you never knew existed, and by the way, you're a grandfather now?" Eliza pulled up a chair beside me. "Remember when we first decided to look for him? What did you tell me then?" I thought back to that conversation, months earlier, that I wasn't looking for another father, that I just wanted to know my story. And has that changed? I considered the question carefully. "No," I said finally. "I still don't need him to be my father. Jefferson filled that role perfectly. But now," I gestured to Clara, "it's not just about me anymore, it's about her too. About giving her as much family, as much history as I can." Eliza nodded. "Then I think you should go. We should go, as a family." 2 weeks later, we stood on the porch of a modest craftsman home in a leafy Portland neighborhood. Clara was strapped to my chest in her carrier, awake and alert, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. Eliza stood beside me, her steady presence calming the nerves that had plagued me throughout the flight north. Before I could ring the bell, the door opened. A man about my age stood there, his resemblance to the photos I'd seen of a young Alexander Hayes so striking that I knew immediately who he was. "Thomas," I said, extending my hand. He took it, his grip firm. "Daniel, welcome!" His eyes dropped to Clara, a smile softening his features. "And this must be Clara. Dad will be thrilled." He didn't know he was meeting his granddaughter today. He led us into a home filled with books and music, family photos covering the walls. In the living room, a man sat in a comfortable armchair by the window. He was in his 60s, his hair more salt than pepper, his hands showing the slight tremor of early Parkinson's. But his eyes, my eyes, were sharp and clear as they fixed on my face. "My God," he said softly, "you look just like her." The simple statement broke something open inside me. Not the dramatic reunion I'd imagined, not accusations or explanations, just that quiet recognition of Claire, in my features, in the genetic code we shared. "I have her journals," I said, my voice unexpectedly steady. "And photos, if you'd like to see them." Alexander Hayes nodded, his eyes never leaving my face. "I would, very much." Thomas quietly ushered Eliza to another room, leaving Clara with me as I sat across from the man who had contributed to my existence without ever knowing it. For a moment we simply looked at each other, searching for connections, for similarities beyond the obvious ones. "I'm sorry I didn't know," he said finally. "If I had, you couldn't have known," I assured him. "Claire made that choice deliberately. She wanted you to follow your path without the complication of an unexpected child." "That sounds like Claire," he said, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "Always making decisions for everyone's good but her own." He leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about your life, your family, how you found out about Claire, about me." And so I did. I told him about growing up as a Mitchell, about Jefferson's protection, about the recordings that had revealed my history. I told him about the wedding revelation, about the corporate coup, about finding Claire's letters and journals. I told him about Eliza, about our decision to adopt Clara, about the recordings I was making for her. As I spoke, Clara began to fuss. Without thinking, I adjusted her position, speaking to her softly until she settled. When I looked up, Alexander was watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're a natural," he said. "With her." "It doesn't feel natural," I admitted. "Most days I'm terrified I'm going to get it wrong." He laughed, a warm sound that crinkled the corners of his eyes the same way mine did. "That never goes away. Thomas is 35, and I still worry I'm getting it wrong with him." The simple statement, the casual acknowledgement of the ongoing nature of parenthood, eased something in me. This wasn't a competition, a comparison between the father who raised me and the one who hadn't known I existed. It was simply two men who understood the weight of responsibility that came with shepherding a new life. "Would you like to hold her?" I asked impulsively. His eyes widened, then softened. "I'd be honored." I transferred Clara carefully to his arms, showing him how to support her head. She looked up at him solemnly, her dark eyes studying this new face with interest. "Hello, little one," he said softly. "I'm your... well, I suppose I'm your grandfather. Another one, in the collection you seem to be amassing." The moment was captured by Thomas, who had returned with a camera to document the meeting. The photograph would later take pride of place in our Berkeley home. Clara cradled in Alexander's arms, my hand still protectively on her back. 3 generations connected not just by blood but by choice, by the deliberate decision to know each other. We stayed in Portland for a week, getting to know the Hayes family, my half-siblings Thomas, Eleanor, and Sophia, their spouses, the 5 grandchildren who were Clara's cousins. We shared meals and stories, photos and memories. Alexander and I pored over Claire's journals together, filling in gaps in each other's understanding of the woman who connected us. On our last evening, as Eliza put Clara to bed in the guest room, Alexander invited me to his study, a book-lined space not unlike Jefferson's, though focused on biology rather than finance. "I have something for you," he said, opening a drawer in his desk. "For Clara, actually, when she's older." He handed me a small wooden box, beautifully crafted, with Clara's name inlaid on the lid. "Thomas mentioned you're making recordings for her," he explained. "I thought perhaps I could contribute to that archive." Inside the box was a collection of small flash drives, each labeled with a topic: the Hayes family history, Alexander's favorite books, letters to my unexpected granddaughter. "I've been recording whenever the tremors allow," he said, a hint of frustration crossing his face. "It's not as comprehensive as your grandfather's archive, but..." "It's perfect," I assured him, deeply moved by the effort, by the parallel to Jefferson's recordings. "Thank you." He nodded, seemingly relieved. "There's something else we should discuss. My condition." He gestured to his trembling hands. "It's progressing, not rapidly, but steadily. The doctors give me perhaps 5 good years before things become significantly more difficult. I felt an unexpected surge of grief for this man I barely knew, for the time we had lost, for the time that was now limited. "I'd like Clara to know me," he continued, "to have memories of me, not just recordings. And I'd like to know you better, to be part of your lives in whatever way makes sense to you." The offer hung between us, gentle but significant. Not a demand for a place in my life, but an invitation to create something new together. "We'd like that too," I said simply. We settled into a rhythm after that. Quarterly visits to Portland, regular video calls, photos, and updates exchanged. Alexander became Grandpa Alex to Clara, distinct from Grandpa Jeff in the stories we told her. As she grew from infant to toddler, her personality emerged, curious and determined, with Clara's artistic talent and Alexander's scientific mind. On Clara's 2nd birthday, we hosted a gathering in our Berkeley garden. The guest list was eclectic. The Hayes family from Portland, Vanessa and her new husband, a few close friends who had become honorary aunts and uncles to Clara. Notably absent were Richard and Caroline Mitchell, who had made tentative overtures toward reconciliation but remained unwilling to fully acknowledge their past actions. As Clara blew out her candles, with considerable help from Eliza, I looked around at the assembled group. This family we had built, piece by piece, choice by choice. There was Alexander, his tremor more pronounced now, but his smile as warm as ever, helping Clara open a present. There was Vanessa, who had undergone her own journey of self-discovery since our coffee shop reconciliation, now watching Clara with genuine affection. There were Thomas and his wife, whose children played happily with Clara's toys. And there, on the sideboard, was the collection of recordings. Jefferson's, Claire's, Alexander's, and my own, preserved for Clara, a testament to the people who had chosen her, who had fought for her place in the world before she even knew she needed defending. Later, as the party wound down, and Clara napped exhausted from excitement, I found myself alone in the kitchen with Vanessa. She was washing dishes, an unexpected domesticity from my once polished sister. "You've built something remarkable here," she said, nodding toward the garden where the remaining guests chatted. "A family that doesn't fit any conventional definition." "It's a work in progress," I admitted, drawing the plates she handed me. "Aren't they all?" She smiled wryly. "Some just admit it more readily than others." She hesitated, then added, "I've been thinking about what you said 2 years ago, about being chosen, about how that was what I resented." I nodded, remembering our conversation after the boardroom confrontation. "You were right," she continued. "But what I've realized since then is that we can all choose. It doesn't have to be a one-way street. I'm choosing now. Choosing to be Clara's aunt, to be your sister in more than name." The simple declaration, free from drama or grand gestures, meant more than any elaborate apology could have. "Thank you," I said simply, "for choosing us." That night, after all the guests had gone and Clara was safely tucked into her bed, I set up the camera in the quiet of my study. This recording wasn't for Clara. Not directly. It was for whoever might come after her, whoever might someday need to understand the complicated, beautiful tapestry of connections that had led to this moment. "My name is Daniel Mitchell," I began. "Adopted son of Richard and Caroline Mitchell, biological son of Claire Lewis and Alexander Hayes, chosen son of Jefferson Mitchell. Today is my daughter Clara's 2nd birthday, and I want to tell you the story of how our family came to be, not through blood, but through choice. Through the radical act of seeing someone and deciding they belong to you, that you belong to them, that together you will create something new and lasting." I spoke for over an hour, documenting the journey from that wedding day revelation to this peaceful evening. I spoke of betrayal and reconciliation, of secrets revealed and bridges rebuilt. I spoke of Clara, of the joy she had brought into our lives, of the way she had healed old wounds simply by existing, by needing us to be whole and present for her. "Family isn't something you're born into," I concluded. "It's something you build, day by day, choice by choice. It's messy and imperfect, and constantly evolving. And it's the most important work any of us will ever do." I ended the recording and sat in the darkness for a moment, thinking of all the voices preserved in our growing archive. Jefferson's strategic mind, Claire's artistic soul, Alexander's scientific precision, Eliza's compassionate wisdom. Different perspectives, different stories, all contributing to the narrative Clara would inherit. The truth hadn't destroyed us. It had set us free to choose, to build, to become. Upstairs, Clara stirred in her sleep. I went to her, adjusting her blanket, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest. In that moment, I understood with perfect clarity what my grandfather had felt as he made those recordings all those years ago. Not fear or anger, but love. Pure, protective, forward-looking love. The kind that prepares the way, that builds bridges to a future it may not see. Sleep well, little one, I whispered. Your story is just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.